Another participant said, I just look around my own programs and I notice a lot of white women. And so I'm just wondering, what am I missing here? What is at play? What am I not seeing?
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Represented Podcast. A couple of weeks ago, we kicked off round 12 of my signature 10-week program, Represented. And honestly, saying that number out loud feels a little surreal. Round 12. Over 4 years of holding this space and what I witnessed in these latest welcome ceremony calls, I need to share it with you. We had 2 calls with participants joining from 4 different continents. We have business coaches, life coaches, midlife coaches, marketing consultants, coaches for artists, and established business owners. There are some who are doing this work for the first time and others returning for their second or even third time in the program. And for that, I am so deeply grateful. Now, what struck me most wasn't just who showed up, but what they were finally ready to name out loud. And this is the invisible gaps, the things they weren't seeing in their own businesses, the work that goes so much deeper than a mere DEI statement on a website. And if you remember my conversation a few episodes back with Johanna Parker, you'll know we spoke about going beyond just having a DEI statement on your website. And so today, I'm pulling back the curtain. I'm giving you a peek inside this welcome ceremony calls because what emerged in these conversations is exactly what the online business world needs to hear right now. So buckle up, let's dive in. The first thing I noticed across both calls was the pattern of which people weren't seeing. And I want to be really clear here. These are great online business owners. They're thoughtful, they care deeply about equity and justice. But there were these unconscious patterns that they were just beginning to recognize. One participant, a midlife coach from Australia, shared something that really captured this well. She said, I've only been coaching for a couple of years and all of my clients have been white. But I just boosted a Facebook post and I'm getting reactions from women of different racial backgrounds. And I wasn't sure if women of color would be interested in working with me. And my response to her was quite simple. Why? Just the question, why? That question sat there because we really need to examine that. Because when we do examine that, We try and get underneath what that assumption is. What makes us think that women of color wouldn't want the transformation we offer? What is it about how we build our businesses, our messaging, our presence that might be communicating something we don't intend? Another participant said, I just look around my own programs and I notice a lot of white women. And so I'm just wondering, what am I missing here? What is at play? What am I not seeing? That question, what am I not seeing? That's the key right there, isn't it? And then there was a business mentor who has paused a program so that she can take stock of some of the things that she's learning from having that particular program. And as she's been reflecting, she's been coming to the conclusion that she was not very clear on holding space for a particular group of clients. And as they shared this, I was just struck at how much courage it takes to name something out loud, to recognize that even with the best intentions, even with a program that is designed with equity in mind, our own biases can get in the way that we want something to operate or what we're trying to create. And this is the work that's not happening in most business spaces. And as I said before, and I'll probably keep saying this, it's not about the big DEI statements. It's not about the black squares we posted in 2020. It's about the daily erosions. And this was put so aptly by a returning participant for the third time. The unexamined assumptions, the covert patterns that make the air feel different when a Black person walks into your store or your program or your coaching container. Let me share a little bit from my own experience about this. I've lived in Australia now for, if you've been listening to this podcast for any amount of time, you'll have heard me share this from time to time. I've called Australia home for over 25 years. And one of the things about racism here is that it's not in your face, it's covert. It'll take you a minute to recognize it. You can't quite see it, but you can sense it, you can feel it, but you can't quite put your finger on it, but it's there. For example, during COVID, it was shared in one of the publications, a newspaper, an article. Somebody discovered that a liquor store in one of the states, they had a note on the counter that read that if somebody of African descent or a Black person walks in, ensure that there are two people at the counter. When I saw that, so much clicked into place for me because I've walked into bottle shops where the vibe just feels different, or even just other stores. I can't explain it, but something shifts. And to know that behind the smiles and the, oh, it's so good to have you here, there might be these hidden reservations, these policies you're not privy to. It's really eye-opening. And this is what a lot of people of color navigate on a regular basis. And this is what white business owners often have no idea is happening, even in their own spaces. Now, Here's where it gets really interesting. Several participants shared that they've already done DEI work. They've either taken courses, they've read books, and they consider themselves educated on these issues. But they're here because they realize that's not enough. They're inside represented program because they realize that's just surface. One participant really captured this well when she said that I think this will resonate with you when you hear this. One participant captured this when she said she's highly educated, has studied race relations, worked in HR, but what I hadn't anticipated or appreciated through it all, and I'm still talking about it 30 years later, which is the part that horrifies me, is that it was so much at a distance from the personal. It was talking about active racism, the racism that we see that it's easy to recognize and distance ourselves from because it's stuff we would never do or say or even think. But also, just talking about the bigger issues like poverty, housing, immigration, nothing to do with actual day-to-day interactions. She went on to say, it feels comfortable to me to talk about dismantling systemic inequality and that sort of thing. And that's all still very distant. It's the tiny little things that just erode, that cause division and separation. It's the erosion day in, day out, minute by minute of different experiences that, as a white person, I have just not had to think about. The erosion day in, day out, minute by minute. Can we just sit with that for a moment? Such a powerful reflection because this is what gets missed. We think we understand racism because we understand the history. We know about slavery, segregation, apartheid. We can talk about systemic barriers and institutional racism. But do we understand what it feels like to walk into a networking event and be the only Black face in the room again? Do we understand the mental calculation that happens? Do I code switch? Do I make myself smaller so that the white people around me feel comfortable? Do I speak up about this microaggression or do I let it slide because I'm tired and I just want to get through the day? Do we understand that when a Black business owner is trying to implement the same strategies we teach in our programs, they might hit walls we've never encountered, that they might not have the same networks, the same benefit of the doubt, the same freedom to show up authentically? This is where the conversation about empathy versus compassion comes in. And it's a distinction I make in Module 1 of Represented. Empathy is important. Empathy is when we put ourselves in someone else's shoes and we feel what they feel. We can be empathetic about what's going on in Gaza right now. We can watch the news and feel heartbroken. We can understand intellectually what is wrong. But compassion takes it a step further. Compassion asks, how do I alleviate this suffering? What can I do in my capacity to make this better? And sometimes it's not direct action. Sometimes we for example, cannot go to Gaza. Sometimes we can't directly intervene in a situation, but we can have ongoing conversations about it at our dinner tables. We can talk about how this is wrong. We can talk about how our leaders haven't stepped up. We can raise children who are growing up and knowing that what we witnessed, what we saw, we knew it was wrong. And we kept having these conversations. It wasn't something that we buried or became comfortable with. We spoke about it and we sought ways to alleviate the pain. That's compassion. And in your business, compassion might look like examining your client intake process. It might look like auditing your marketing copy. It might look like diversifying whom you're learning from, who you collaborate with, who you invite into your world. It might look like what one of the participants said about working with her clients, and I'll share that story in just a moment. But I want to just open your eyes to why participants are coming back a second and even a third time to represented program. Why are business owners investing their time and money into this work when, let's be honest, it would be so much easier to just keep doing what they're doing? And it reminds me of one of the participants who said, I've been coaching for 6 or 7 years now. Most of her clients are white. And even though she lives in a country where the majority of the population is Black, and she's been engaging in her own work around racial equity. She's always felt passionate about social justice from when she was little. And she's just had this physical reaction to injustice. But the reason why she felt she needed to commit to this is because it's not enough. So she started working with people of color. And here's what she did that is so important. Every time before she starts working together with a person of color, she starts by saying, you know, I'm white and I'm not from this country. I know about this country, but I haven't lived in it. And the first time she shared this with her client, she was afraid. Her heart was racing, palms sweaty. Should she even be saying that? Is it too much, too little? What impact will this have on their coaching relationship? But she decided to say it anyway. And here's what happened. The client said, I really appreciate you being so vulnerable about this. And the outcome for this coaching client is that it's been the most fulfilling coaching relationships she's had. She said they've been learning from each other. And I remember just beaming and feeling this just excitement on the inside because there are so many things I wish we shared more, but they're not because, to be fair, a lot of white coaches just don't know if it's okay to say certain things. And also to look at it from the other perspective, it's not to say that by sharing a statement like that, hey, I'm white, um, I may not understand some of the things that you're going through, but I want you to know this from the very beginning. It may not go down well for everyone because I can't speak for all Black people or people of color. But what I do know is that when a coach names their own limitations, when they acknowledge the differences in lived experience, it does something. It allows a person of color to bring a little bit more of themselves into that coaching container. They don't have to code switch as much, and they don't have to feel the responsibility of making the white person feel comfortable. And this is what represented creates a space where white business owners can learn to do this, to name their limitations, to hold space differently, to move from good intentions to actual capacity. And the methodology that we go through, it matters. There's a reason people keep coming back. And I often share this quote from the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who said, when you're passionate about something and you want to bring people along, do it in a way that will make them want to come along. And that's my approach when it comes to calling in people and not calling them out. Permission to make mistakes. No room for shame, guilt, or judgment because it just gets in the way of this work that we're trying to do. And what I've learned over the past 12 rounds, when we constantly correct people, when we shame them, when we guilt trip them, nobody's going to come for that journey. It's just going to be crickets. But when you embrace people, when you treat them like humans and you allow them to make mistakes and you call them in lovingly, we are bound to make more progress. Is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. But as a coach, as a space holder, I am more inclined to do this work that brings people along when it is done in a more human way. Okay, so let's talk about what actually changes when you do this work because it's one thing to have good intentions, it's another to see tangible shifts in your business and in how you hold space. A returning participant, I think second time Inside Represented said, I think every coach and space provider needs to hear this. Since doing Represented the first time, I've worked with a fair few people of color now. I don't think I would have been able to hold the space that I do without doing Represented back in 2023. Just having the understanding that I do now, being able to see people of color for what they're saying, not just at face value, but actually understand without them having to over explain it and just not having to ask questions about certain things. I can reflect what they're saying back without requiring them to actually talk more about it when they don't need to because I have an understanding. Can you hear what she's saying? She's not making her clients of color educate her. She's not putting the burden on them to explain their experience. She's done the work. She's doing the work. So she can actually hold space for them that allows them to fulfill their goals inside their coaching container. That's what changes when you do the work. Your capacity changes, who you attract changes, how you hold space changes. And here's something I want you to understand. When your network diversifies, when you're hanging out with different people, when your business besties are from diverse backgrounds, you begin to naturally attract different kinds of clients, still ideal clients, but from diverse backgrounds. But there's another layer to this that I think is really important, especially for those of you who are teaching business strategy or leadership or even visibility. When we come into your space and we are not all on an even playing field, you might be sharing something that works for everyone, but it doesn't work the same way for us. Case in point, I've worked with women of color who ask me, how do you put yourself out there, Annie? How do you say, buy this from me, join my program? And before working with them in this capacity, I had never really thought too deeply about it because I've learned to get comfortable being uncomfortable. But there are people who come from communities where putting yourself out there is a no-no. You're supposed to be humble. You're not supposed to be selling. Selling is wrong. Putting yourself out there is wrong. And if you don't understand that mindset, if you don't understand where they're coming from, their customs, their culture, it's not something you can coach them through. You can't hold space for them to do it in a way that brings around transformation for them. And so when I've worked with coaches who are in this work, who have done this work, it's so much easier to open up because I know they know. I know they understand, or at least have some understanding. I'm not having to educate them in the midst of being coached. And that's a big difference. And so this is round 12 of Represented. And as you've heard, online business owners are coming back for seconds and thirds. And this is because it's fulfilling work. It is lifelong work. And they're finally doing it in a way that doesn't require being prim and proper. You can bring your imperfections. I think there's this misconception that when you're doing this kind of work, you've got to be postured a certain way. You've got to be presented in a very polished way. But again, hear me when I say that just gets in the way because you really, really need to be in a space where you feel you can bring those imperfections and work on them. In both welcome ceremony calls, one of the things that I do that is I find really grounding and special is song. And we do have a special playlist for the entire program. But there's a particular song that I play at the beginning. It's called Breathe by India Ray. And it's powerful. And it's about continuing to breathe through injustice, through pain, through the work. And it is something that this work asks of us to breathe through the discomfort, to keep showing up, even when we're afraid of getting it wrong, to keep learning, growing, and doing better. One of the things that was shared during our call, and I really want to leave you with this message, is that one of the participants felt like coming back to Represented is like watching a movie when you're younger and then watching it again when you're older. You see things differently. You've learned things along the way. You come back with a different lens. That's what this work is. It's not one and done. It's ongoing. It's layered. And every time you return to it, you see more. You understand more. And because of that, you can do more. So if you're listening to this and you're still here, thank you. Maybe you're noticing gaps in who you serve. If you've been doing DEI work, but not out loud or in community, if you're ready to move from knowing better to doing better because there's a difference between knowing and doing, if you want to be the kind of business owner, the kind of coach, the kind of leader who can hold space for every one of your ideal clients, not just the people who look like you, the waitlist for Represented program is open for the April round. This work doesn't require some kind of prep. It simply requires you to show up, to breathe through the discomfort, and to commit to the journey. And I promise you, it's fulfilling work. It's life-changing work, not just for the people you'll serve, but for you. You can join the waitlist at anigishiro.com/represented. And if you want to keep learning, keep listening to this podcast. I release episodes every week covering racial equity, inclusion, and representation in life and business. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being willing to do this work.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. P. Mbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata.
Represented from coast to coast.